Ladies and gentlemen, today, we are not just talking about a villain. We are uncovering the origin of a nightmare, a name whispered in fear across generations. This is the story of Ryomen Sukuna, the being known as the true king of curses. Long before Ryomen Sukuna became the most feared name in Jujutsu history, before he was sealed, divided, and remembered as a curse rather than a man, he existed as something far more unsettling, a living legend whose reputation alone inspired terror. In the ancient era of Jujutsu, stories were not written for entertainment, they were warnings. And Sukuna's story began as one of those warnings, passed from sorcerer to sorcerer, village to village, not as myth, but as survival knowledge. In those early days, the Jujutsu world was raw and unforgiving. There were no formal schools, no clear hierarchy, no modern systems of control. Sorcerers learned through bloodshed, failure, and death. Power determined status, and mercy was considered weakness. It was within this violent era that Sukuna's name first surfaced, not attached to a curse, but to an unbeatable force of nature walking among humans. At first, Sukuna was spoken of as an anomaly. Sorcerers whispered about a man with unnatural cursed energy reserves, someone whose presence alone bent the atmosphere around him. Battles involving Sukuna were said to end before they truly began. Entire squads of trained sorcerers vanished after confronting him, leaving behind no bodies, only scorched earth and silence. These accounts were not exaggerated legends. They were eyewitness memories, shared by those lucky enough to flee. What made Sukuna terrifying was not just his strength, but his unpredictability. Other powerful sorcerers followed codes: protect the weak, preserve balance, destroy curses. Sukuna followed nothing. He fought when he wished, killed when he was bored, and spared lives only when it amused him. That randomness turned fear into something deeper. You could not reason with Sukuna. You could not negotiate. And you could never be sure why he chose to act. As his reputation spread, Sukuna stopped being referred to as a man. He became a concept, a symbol of inevitable destruction. Villages collapsed simply because rumors placed him nearby. Sorcerers avoided entire regions believed to be under his influence. Even curses, beings born from human fear, were said to recoil in his presence. This reversal terrified Jujutsu society more than anything else. When curses fear someone, what does that make him? The myth around Sukuna grew darker with each retelling. Some described him as having 2 faces, 4 arms, and a body that defied human anatomy. Others claimed he could fight endlessly without fatigue, his cursed energy regenerating faster than it could be depleted. These descriptions blurred reality and exaggeration, but that was the point. Over time, no one could tell where truth ended and legend began, and that uncertainty was part of Sukuna's power. Jujutsu elders of the era faced a terrifying realization: Sukuna could not be defeated by conventional means. Multiple assassination attempts failed. Large-scale coordinated attacks ended in disaster. Each loss only fed his legend, reinforcing the belief that Sukuna was invincible. The more he survived, the more myth overtook man. Fear amplified his cursed energy, and his cursed energy amplified fear. It was a perfect loop. Eventually, Sukuna stopped being viewed as human entirely. He was called a calamity, a natural disaster given form. Sorcerers spoke his name with the same caution as they did plagues or earthquakes. Children were warned not to wander because Sukuna might be watching. His name became a tool of control, a psychological weapon used to instill obedience and fear. And yet, at the core of the myth was a disturbing truth: Sukuna was still alive. Still choosing. Still enjoying the chaos he caused. What truly separated Sukuna from other feared figures was that he embraced his legend. Unlike sorcerers who tried to hide or suppress their notoriety, Sukuna leaned into it. He allowed rumors to spread. He let exaggerations grow unchecked. Every distorted story made him more untouchable. If people believed he was a demon, then they would hesitate to challenge him as a man. This transformation, from human to myth, was not accidental. It was strategic. Sukuna understood something fundamental about power: fear is stronger than strength. A feared enemy can win battles without fighting. And Sukuna mastered this psychological warfare long before modern Jujutsu theory recognized it. By the time Jujutsu society finally attempted to erase him from history, it was already too late. Sukuna was no longer just a person to be killed. He was a legend embedded in collective memory. Even sealing him did not destroy the myth, it preserved it. His fingers became cursed objects not only because of their power, but because of what they represented, fragments of a godlike terror that once walked the earth. This is why Sukuna's origins matter so deeply. He was not born a curse. He was shaped by an era that rewarded brutality and feared restraint. The myth came first, then the monster. And in understanding that, we see the most chilling truth of all. Sukuna is not terrifying because he was inhuman. He is terrifying because he was human, and chose to become something worse. As Sukuna's legend spread across the ancient Jujutsu world, one question began to haunt sorcerers more than his violence or his cruelty: what exactly was Ryomen Sukuna? Not a curse, at least not at first. And not entirely human either. His existence sat in an uncomfortable space between categories, forcing Jujutsu society to confront a terrifying possibility, that a human could evolve beyond curses without losing their humanity, or perhaps by discarding it entirely. Historical records suggest that Sukuna began as a human sorcerer, but one who was fundamentally different from his peers. Unlike others who inherited techniques or trained within traditions, Sukuna's power appeared self-generated, as if his body and soul were naturally attuned to cursed energy at a level that shouldn't have been possible. His cursed energy wasn't just immense, it was refined, violent, and instinctively hostile. Where most sorcerers shaped cursed energy like a tool, Sukuna's cursed energy behaved like a living predator. This led to early theories that Sukuna had undergone some form of forbidden transformation. Some believed he had consumed powerful curses to increase his strength. Others whispered that he had performed rituals so blasphemous they fractured his very soul. These theories gained traction when witnesses described Sukuna's inhuman anatomy: 4 arms, 2 faces, a body that looked like it had rejected the natural rules of life. But the most unsettling interpretation was also the simplest: Sukuna didn't transform through ritual. He evolved. Sukuna treated combat not as a duty, but as experimentation. Each battle was a test, of his limits, his opponents, and reality itself. He pushed cursed techniques past safe thresholds, ignored physical damage, and willingly walked into situations that would kill any other sorcerer. Where others feared death, Sukuna seemed to welcome it, as if daring the world to prove it could end him. That mindset alone placed him outside normal humanity. This is where Sukuna's philosophy truly separated him from both sorcerers and curses. He rejected morality entirely. Sorcerers claimed to fight for balance. Curses existed to embody hatred. Sukuna chose neither. He believed strength was the only truth, and anything unable to withstand it deserved to be destroyed. To him, compassion was self-deception, and justice was a lie invented by the weak to survive the strong. Ironically, this worldview aligned him closer to curses than humans, but with one critical difference. Curses are born from fear and emotion. Sukuna was born from choice. He chose domination. He chose cruelty, and that choice made him more dangerous than any curse driven by instinct. As his power grew, Sukuna's body began to reflect his inner nature. His monstrous form wasn't a punishment, it was an adaptation. His soul reshaped his flesh to better house his overwhelming cursed energy. This phenomenon would later terrify Jujutsu scholars, because it proved that the soul, not the body, was the true foundation of power. Sukuna didn't lose his humanity by becoming a monster. He abandoned it because it limited him. This realization shattered Jujutsu society's understanding of curses. If a human could surpass curses without becoming one, then the line between human and monster was thinner than anyone believed. Sukuna wasn't an accident. He was proof of concept. And that truth made him unforgivable. Sorcerers eventually stopped debating what Sukuna was and focused instead on what had to be done. He could not be reasoned with. He could not be redeemed. And he could not be killed without unimaginable losses. This led to the most desperate decision in Jujutsu history, sealing him instead of destroying him. But even in defeat, Sukuna defied expectations. His soul refused to disappear. His power fragmented, crystallizing into cursed objects that retained his will and hunger. This was the final confirmation that Sukuna had crossed a threshold no one else had. He had achieved a form of immortality through pure dominance of self. Sukuna was not born a curse. He became something worse, a human who mastered curses so completely that even death could not claim him. As Sukuna's power reached heights no sorcerer had ever witnessed, fear began to spread faster than his destruction. Villages didn't just fall, they were erased from history. Entire regions became forbidden zones, not because of lingering curses, but because Sukuna had once walked there. His presence alone was enough to scar the land. And with that fear came unity, something the fractured Jujutsu world had never truly achieved before. For the first time, rival clans, ancient families, and independent sorcerers set aside their hatred for one purpose: stop Sukuna. This coalition was unprecedented. Sorcerers who had once fought each other to the death now stood side by side. Barrier specialists, cursed tool masters, healers, strategists, all gathered under a single desperate goal. Not to defeat Sukuna, but to survive him long enough to seal him away. Even then, most understood the grim truth: victory meant sacrifice. Many would die, some would be erased completely. The battles that followed were not heroic clashes, they were massacres dressed as resistance. Sukuna did not fight like a conqueror. He fought like a god testing mortals. He allowed attacks to land just to measure them. He dismantled elite sorcerers with casual movements, adapting instantly to techniques that had taken lifetimes to perfect. Domain expansions collapsed under his overwhelming presence. Cursed tools shattered in his grip. Barriers tore apart as if they were paper. What terrified the coalition most was Sukuna's intelligence. He wasn't reckless. He analyzed. He learned. Every attack against him made him more dangerous. Every technique revealed became obsolete within moments. It was clear that prolonged combat only favored him. Realizing this, the sorcerers changed their strategy. They abandoned the idea of killing Sukuna altogether. Instead, they focused on containment, the most taboo, dangerous form of jujutsu. Sealing a being like Sukuna required conditions so precise that even a single mistake would doom everyone involved. It meant sacrificing powerful sorcerers as anchors, binding contracts with lethal consequences, and using forbidden artifacts that damage the soul itself. Even then, Sukuna resisted. Records describe the sealing ritual as reality screaming in protest. Space twisted. Cursed energy surged uncontrollably. Sorcerers died simply standing too close. And yet, slowly, impossibly, Sukuna was restrained, not defeated, but divided. His essence was split and sealed into indestructible cursed objects, each fragment retaining his consciousness, hunger, and malice. This act reshaped the Jujutsu world forever. The victory was hollow. Thousands were dead. Entire clans vanished. Knowledge was lost. Techniques disappeared with their users. And worst of all, the sealing proved something terrifying: Sukuna could not be erased. Even fragmented, even bound, his existence endured. He became a living curse upon history itself, a reminder of how close humanity had come to annihilation. In the aftermath, Jujutsu society changed its laws, its teachings, and its philosophy. Sorcerers were no longer trained merely to fight curses, they were trained to prevent another Sukuna from ever being born. Forbidden research was sealed away. Power was monitored. Bloodlines were controlled. Fear became policy. And yet, despite all precautions, one truth lingered in the shadows. Sukuna was not destroyed. He was waiting. Waiting for the day his fragments would reunite. Waiting for a vessel strong enough to contain him. Waiting for humanity to once again prove that it had learned nothing from history. The coalition may have sealed the king of curses, but in doing so, they ensured that his legend would never die. Even after Sukuna was sealed, his influence did not fade. In fact, it became more dangerous. Legends usually weaken with time, but Sukuna's presence did the opposite. He transformed from a physical calamity into a concept, a nightmare etched into the foundations of Jujutsu society. His name alone became forbidden. His history was censored. His existence was turned into a warning whispered only among elders and special-grade sorcerers. The cursed objects created from Sukuna's fragmented essence, his fingers, were declared indestructible. No technique, no weapon, no barrier could erase them. This alone proved a horrifying truth. Sukuna was not just powerful, he was beyond the rules that governed sorcerers and curses alike. Even sealed, he defied the natural order. Each fragment continued to emit cursed energy so dense that weaker sorcerers went mad simply being near them. Special grade curses were drawn to them instinctively, as if worshipping a forgotten god. To prevent catastrophe, the Jujutsu world scattered the fingers across distant locations, sealing them under layers of barriers and supervision. But this created a new problem: Sukuna became immortal through division. As long as even one fragment existed, the King of Curses could never truly die. The seal was not an end. It was a pause. Over generations, Sukuna's legend mutated. Some saw him as pure evil, a demon born from hatred. Others believed he was once human, twisted by power and cruelty until he transcended humanity itself. That uncertainty made him even more terrifying. Because if Sukuna was once human, then his existence proved a devastating possibility, that any sorcerer, given enough power and desire, could become the next King of Curses. This fear reshaped the ethics of Jujutsu society. Strength was no longer celebrated blindly. Potential was monitored. Sorcerers with abnormal growth were feared as much as they were praised. In many ways, Sukuna became the shadow behind every prodigy. Every time a sorcerer showed exceptional talent, elders asked the same silent question: will this one save the world, or destroy it? And then, fate made its cruelest move. Centuries after Sukuna's sealing, his cursed fingers resurfaced, not as relics, but as catalysts. The balance that the Jujutsu world had struggled to maintain began to crack. Curses grew stronger. Seals weakened. The world unknowingly drifted back toward the same conditions that once allowed Sukuna to reign. This is where Sukuna's true terror lies. He doesn't need to conquer again. He doesn't need armies. He doesn't need followers. All he needs is time. Because Sukuna represents an eternal truth of the Jujutsu world, cursed energy is born from humanity's darkness, and that darkness never disappears. As long as fear, hatred, and desire exist, Sukuna's existence will always be relevant. He is not just a villain of the past, he is the consequence of human nature itself. When Sukuna eventually returns, he doesn't return as a relic. He returns as a judgment. A reminder that seals can fail. That history repeats. That power without restraint leads to annihilation. Sukuna is not simply the King of Curses because he was the strongest. He is the King of Curses because he embodies the very reason curses exist. And that is why, even sealed, even fragmented, even forgotten, Ryomen Sukuna remains the most dangerous being the Jujutsu world has ever known.